Help me reach 1,500 subscribers. She said his name the way people answer a question they think is stupid. Slowly, clearly, as if the truth had been sitting right there the whole time and I was the only one foolish enough to miss it. We were standing in the parking lot outside her favorite restaurant, the one with warm yellow lights and fake ivy crawling up brick walls, the place that felt like a scrapbook of our life together. We'd celebrated promotions there, anniversaries, random Tuesdays when we didn't feel like cooking. That night, the air smelled like rain and gasoline, and I remember that detail vividly because my mind clung to anything that wasn't the sound of her voice finishing my life for me. I choose him. There was no apology wrapped around it. No shaking hands. No cracking voice. Just certainty, clean and sharp. People always talk about moments like this as if the universe reacts. As if the ground splits open or thunder rolls or some sad music swells in the background. None of that happened. A car alarm chirped somewhere nearby. Someone laughed too loudly as they passed us. A door slammed. Life kept moving with cruel efficiency, completely uninterested in my collapse. I looked at her for a second longer than I should have. I was searching her face like it might betray her words, some flicker of hesitation, fear, regret, anything that would tell me this was a mistake, that we could rewind 10 minutes and pretend this conversation never happened. There was nothing. Her phone buzzed in her hand, and she didn't even try to hide the smile that touched her lips when she saw the screen. So I nodded. Okay, I said. That single word surprised her. I could see it immediately. She had prepared herself for something else, for anger, questions, bargaining, tears, a scene she could later justify to herself. She hadn't prepared for acceptance. I turned around, walked to my car and got in. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. I didn't chase after her when my phone started lighting up minutes later, her calls coming faster once she realized I wasn't following. By the time I reached my apartment, the calls had stopped. The silence that followed was loud, but it was also clean, like a wound that had finally been cauterized instead of reopened again and again. The first few weeks were brutal in quiet, ordinary ways. Mornings were the worst, reaching for my phone half asleep, expecting her good morning text, only to remember it wasn't coming. Evenings stretched out endlessly, empty roads with no destination. Friends tried to help in the ways friends always do, offering distractions, advice, sympathy, and well-meaning cliches. I appreciated the effort, but none of that is what saved me. What saved me was routine. I woke up early even when I didn't want to. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs trembled, until physical pain drowned out emotional noise. I worked late. I stopped telling my story to anyone who would listen and started listening to myself instead. Slowly, uncomfortably, I realized how much of my identity had been built around her orbit. My weekends, my plans, the compromises I didn't even recognize as compromises anymore. Without her gravity, I floated for a while, untethered and disoriented, unsure which direction was forward. Then gradually I stabilized. I took a role at work I'd been avoiding for years because it meant longer hours and frequent travel. I moved into a smaller place closer to the office, one that felt temporary but honest. I started saying no to things I didn't want and yes to things that scared me. My life didn't become magical or painless. It just became mine, and that was enough. Months passed. Her name stopped ambushing me in my thoughts. When it did appear, it no longer cut the same way. I heard through mutual friends that she and the other man were serious, moving fast, making big gestures, posting big smiles online. I muted every channel that might bring her back into my line of sight. Not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. Almost a year later, I ran into her. It was a grocery store on a random Tuesday night. I was reaching for a carton of eggs when I heard my name spoken carefully, like someone testing fragile glass. I turned. She looked different, not worse, just worn in places I hadn't seen before. The confidence I remembered was thinner now, stretched over something restless and tired. We stood awkwardly between shelves of cereal and canned soup, two people who knew each other too well to pretend and too little to speak freely. She asked how I'd been. I told her the truth briefly. She said she'd heard I was doing well. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to sink into. "I think about you sometimes," she said finally. I nodded, the same small nod from that night in the parking lot. "I figured," I said. She laughed nervously. "You always were calm. Even then. Especially then." That was the first crack, not in me but in the story she'd been telling herself. The one where I was the obstacle, the safe option, the man she had outgrown. Calm, it turned out, was harder to forget than anger. We said goodbye without drama. I walked home feeling strangely light. Closure, I learned, isn't fireworks. Sometimes it's just realizing you're no longer holding your breath. I didn't expect to hear from her again. 2 weeks later she showed up at my door. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was halfway through fixing a loose cabinet hinge when I heard the knock. I opened the door and there she was, eyes red, mascara smudged, holding herself together by sheer will. "I know I shouldn't be here," she said. But I didn't know where else to go. I let her in not because I wanted her back, but because I wasn't afraid of her anymore. She talked fast, words tumbling over each other, like if she slowed down she might lose her nerve. She told me how the relationship she'd chosen burned hot and fast before turning sharp. How the certainty she'd felt that night evaporated under pressure. How she'd mistaken intensity for depth and attention for commitment. In the quiet moments, she said, she started remembering how safe it had felt with me, and how much she'd taken that safety for granted. "I made the biggest mistake of my life," she said, tears spilling freely now. "And I know I don't deserve it, but I have to ask. Is there any chance?" I listened without interrupting. When she finished, the room felt unnaturally still. I thought about the man I'd been when she chose someone else. The tight chest, the stunned silence, the dignity I'd clung to by walking away. Then I thought about the man standing there now, hands steady, heart intact. "I forgive you," I said. Her face lit up with sudden, fragile hope. "But I'm not coming back," I continued. The hope collapsed into shock. She stared at me like she'd misheard. "You're not?" "No," I said gently. "What we had mattered. It shaped me. But it belonged to a version of me that doesn't exist anymore. I didn't survive that night just to undo the work I've done since." She sat down slowly, stunned, like someone who had rehearsed a speech but never imagined the other person might change their lines. "I thought you'd be waiting," she whispered. "I wasn't waiting," I said. "I was living." She cried then, openly, quietly, without accusation or drama. When she left, she hugged me the way someone hugs when they know it's final, not like someone slamming a door. The shock didn't stop with her. Word traveled quickly through our shared circles. People who had expected a dramatic reunion didn't know what to do with the fact that I'd chosen peace over pride and self-respect over nostalgia. Some called it cold. Others called it strong. I didn't call it anything. Just felt honest. Weeks later I met someone new. Nothing cinematic, just an easy conversation, a laugh that didn't feel forced, a sense of being seen without being tested. I didn't rush it. I didn't compare. I didn't drag old wounds into new rooms. Months after that knock on my door, I ran into my ex again at a friend's gathering. She saw me across the room, happy, grounded, no bitterness in my posture. Our eyes met, and for a moment, everything unspoken passed between us. She smiled sadly. I smiled back. I walked away again without looking back. The difference this time was simple and final. I wasn't walking away from her. I was walking toward myself.